And yet another very lovely morning out there to all of you, my dear friends. We left off in Jeremiah 26 Bible study where Jeremiah, he's still being persecuted, but now it's in Jerusalem at the temple. They tried to kill him. He was saved by a couple of friends there. But now we pick up in Jeremiah 27, one of the more known of the events in Jeremiah's life right here. Quite fascinating, these two chapters that we're getting into today. In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, came this word unto Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Thus saith the Lord to me, Make thee bonds and yokes, and put them upon thy neck. Now, it's always good to have a refresher on these lineup of kings, because Josiah, Jehoaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, they all sound the same. But remember, Zedekiah with a Z, he's the final king before they go into captivity. So the Z, just like the alphabet. But right now we're talking about number 18, Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah. Matter of fact, all of these are the sons of Josiah, except for Jehoiakim, whom is the grandson of Josiah. The prophecy that follows was according to this reading given in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, 15 years before it was published in the reign of Zedekiah, the final king, to whom it refers. It was thus long deposited in the prophet's bosom, in order that by it he might be supported under trials in his prophetic career in the interim. So the Lord orders him to put this yoke upon him, and it's symbolic. He's to go into the Jews now and deliver this message. But this message is also to go to the other kings, ordering them, you all shall also have a yoke upon your neck. Pretty much ordering all the nations to surrender to Nebuchadnezzar. And send them, this message, to the king of Edom, and to the king of Moab, and to the king of the Ammonites, and to the king of Tyrus, and to the king of Zidon, by the hand of the messengers which came to Jerusalem unto Zedekiah, king of Judah. And command these messengers to say unto their masters, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Thus shall ye say unto your masters, I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are upon the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it unto whom it seemed right unto me. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him, and all nations shall serve him, and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. Now indeed this prophecy was fulfilled to the T, and all nations shall serve Nebuchadnezzar and his son and his grandson. But they wouldn't be in straight succession like Josiah. Nebuchadnezzar had 4 successors: Evil-Merodach his son, Neriglissar, husband of Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, and his son Nabozaradan, and Nebuchadnezzar, with whom his son Belshazzar was joint king. Now Belshazzar would have been his grandson, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, and he would have been the final king over Babylon. If you'll remember the handwriting on the wall, the writing on the wall, well, that happened the night of Belshazzar. Anyway, but Neriglissar and Nabozaradan were not in the direct male line, so that the prophecy held good to his son and his son's son, and the intermediate two are omitted from this prophecy. And it shall come to pass that the nation and the kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword and with the famine and with the pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. Therefore hearken not to your prophets, nor to your diviners, nor to your dreamers, nor to your enchanters, nor to your sorcerers, which speak unto you, saying, Ye shall not serve the king of Babylon, for they prophesy a lie unto you, to remove you far from your land, and that I should drive you out, and ye should perish. This is a quite intriguing message, because this is the Lord speaking even to these pagans. He's saying, don't listen to your prophets, don't listen to your false gods. He says, now you all listen to me. It's very startling, especially in the sense that so many people are confined to believing that God only spoke to Jerusalem or to the Jews or to Israel. Well, no, he's always reached out to other nations, always. We're just told about Israel and his interaction with them because Christ would come through them. So they're given that special privilege. But the nations that bring their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, those will I let remain still in their own land, saith the Lord, and they shall till it and dwell therein. So right here we're seeing a servitude where Nebuchadnezzar would allow the nations, whomever surrendered to him, much like in the days of Alexander the Great. Kings have always done this. The pharaohs would do this. And they would go in, they'd conquer a place, and that place would be so far off that they would just put up a king or someone to rule over them and whom they would trust and who would serve them. And they would allow the people and everything to pretty much remain the same in order to keep from uprisings and all. And so that's what God's promising. He says, if you just surrender, you'll be able to remain in your own land. You know, you'll have to pay a tax, a tribute yearly or so. But, yeah, the great Asiatic conquerors contented themselves in the first place with thoroughly subjecting the vanquished nations and imposing a tribute. Only in the case of stubborn resistance or of insurrection on the part of the conquered did they proceed to destroy the kingdoms and deport their populations. And this is really a very merciful thing on behalf of God, how even though these people have fallen from him over and over again, he still says, look, I'll show you mercy and you'll still have peace, but do this thing. Just surrender. Just give up your pride. Just give it up. Listen to my prophet and everything. And now you see the burden of Jeremiah. I spake also to Zedekiah, king of Judah, according to all these words, saying, bring your necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon, and serve him and his people, and live. Why will ye die, thou and thy people, by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence, as the Lord hath spoken against that nation that will not serve the king of Babylon? This is very heart-wrenching. Why will ye die? You don't have to die. You don't have to perish. What the prophet here says to Zedekiah has a particular weight in it. Because he was made king of Judea by Nebuchadnezzar and had taken, now Zedekiah was made king by Nebuchadnezzar, and had taken an oath to be faithful to him and never to resist his authority. But this phrase, why will ye die, this always sticks with me every time that I read this. In a way, this phrase could be asked of the lost and the damned. Why will ye die? Why resist my shepherd? Which Nebuchadnezzar is referred to, but ultimately Christ himself, who says, my burden is easy, my yoke is light, much like the yoke that Jeremiah has upon his shoulders at this moment, can also be viewed in the same context. Take my yoke upon you, he says. Why will ye die the second death? Therefore hearken not unto the words of the false prophets that speak unto you, saying, Ye shall not serve the king of Babylon, for they prophesy a lie unto you. For I have not sent them, saith the Lord. Yet they prophesy a lie in my name, that I might drive you out, and that ye might perish, ye and the prophets that prophesy unto you. Also I spake to the priest and to all this people, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Hearken not to the words of your prophets that prophesy unto you, saying, Behold, the vessels of the Lord's house shall now shortly be brought again from Babylon. Now pay attention to this, because the vessels were taken in before this time in a prior captivity. Some of the vessels of the Lord's house of Solomon's temple, they were taken by Nebuchadnezzar at that time. And some of the false prophets were coming out saying, the vessels shall be returned. This is one of their false prophecies that we're told about right here, and that's what's been brought up. For they prophesy a lie unto you, hearken not unto them, serve the king of Babylon and live. Wherefore should this city be laid waste? But if they be prophets, and if the word of the Lord be with them, let them now make intercession to the Lord of hosts, that the vessels which are left in the house of the Lord, and in the house of the king of Judah, and at Jerusalem, go not to Babylon. He says, let them prophesy, and let them make a sure thing of it. And if it doesn't come to pass, you know they're false prophets. If they take all these other things, you know they're false and have been. For thus saith the Lord of hosts concerning the pillars, the big pillars right there, and concerning the sea, concerning the bases and concerning the residue of the vessels that remain in this city, which Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon took not, when he carried away captive Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the nobles of Judah and Jerusalem. That is the second captivity that happened. Now, once again, just a quick refresher, there were three captivities of Nebuchadnezzar, and the first happened in Jehoiakim's day, then in his son's day, and then Zedekiah's. Now, what happened right here was in Jehoiakim's day, at the first, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all of them went. And then in Jehoiakim's, then Ezekiel was taken in Jehoiakim's day. And the vessels, as we're told right here from the temple, many of the vessels and expensive things. And we're about to see it all come down and crumble to Zedekiah. Yea, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, concerning the vessels that remain in the house of the Lord in Solomon's temple, and in the house of the king of Judah and of Jerusalem, they shall be carried to Babylon, and there shall they be until the day that I visit them, saith the Lord, 70 years later. Then will I bring them up and restore them to this place. So Jeremiah, with this yoke upon him, he's speaking to King Zedekiah, the final king, and he's telling him about all these things. All this is going to get taken away. Jeremiah assures them that the brazen vessels should go after the golden ones, because they had taken the golden ones. Now they're about to take the brazen. All shall be carried to Babylon. But he concludes with a gracious promise that the time would come when they should be brought back. But one must understand about when the start of the 70 years actually began. It did not begin at the carrying away of Zedekiah. In 70 years from the first carrying away of captains in Jehoiakim's reign, which would have been at the beginning of Jehoiakim's reign, but at the end of his father Jehoiakim's reign. So that would have been the first carrying away, and then the second would have been at the end of Jehoiakim's reign. But that's whenever the 70 years actually began. By the hand of Cyrus would they be free, as well as by Artaxerxes. So now we're picking up in the next chapter. After Jeremiah concludes that speech before the king, he then goes into, still having the yoke upon him, he goes into the temple and begins to share the same message. And it came to pass in the same year, in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 4th year and in the 5th month, that Hananiah, the son of Azur, the prophet, so Hananiah, this man, he's in the temple, and he's the son of a prophet, which was of Gibeon, spake unto me in the house of the Lord, in the presence of the priests and of all the people, saying, it seems likely the utterance of Hananiah which follows was on the same day on which Jeremiah appeared in public wearing a yoke on his neck. So this is probably the same day, even though it gives a lot of details on the year and, whatever. Hananiah was clearly one of the leaders of the party of resistance, whom we have seen at work trying to form an alliance with the neighboring nations in Jeremiah 27, and whose hopes had been revived by the accession of Pharaoh Hophra to the throne of Egypt. So he is one of these that prophesy, no, we need to do the exact opposite of what Jeremiah says. He's an enemy. Okay, so we're told that this Hananiah is from Gibeon, and remember, Jeremiah is from Anathoth, both within the land of Benjamin. And Gibeon was, like Anathoth, within the tribe of Benjamin, about 6 or 7 miles from Jerusalem to the northwest. And so the antagonism between the true prophet Jeremiah and the false in Jerusalem may have been the revival of older local conflicts. Also, like Anathoth, Gibeon was one of the cities of priests. You can read about that in Joshua 21. So these are both cities of priests that these men are from. The occasion on which he now appears was probably one of the new moon, Sabbath, or other feast days on which the courts of the temple were probably very crowded. And we see these kind of standoffs quite often in the scripture. We've seen it with Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh's court. We also see David and Goliath. These things are very public usually, with Elijah on Mount Carmel against the hundreds of Baal prophets. Anyway, we're seeing this right here. God likes to make these kind of displays to show the people all at once. Kind of a shock value to it. But Hananiah, he starts to prophesy. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, saying, I have broken the yoke of the king of Babylon. Within 2 full years will I bring again into this place all the vessels of the Lord's house that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, took away from this place and carried them to Babylon. And I will bring again to this place Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, with all the captives of Judah that went into Babylon, saith the Lord, for I will break the yoke of the king of Babylon. Now, Jeconiah, once again, that was the king right before Zedekiah. And he's saying this, that the former king would come back during the reign of the sitting king Zedekiah. We get here a new glimpse into the nature of the anti-Chaldean confederacy. Zedekiah was to be deposed as too submissive to Nebuchadnezzar, and the young Jeconiah was to be brought back from his prison at Babylon and reestablished in the kingdom. Jeconiah likely retained a substantial following. They apparently really admired the young Jeconiah, and they probably wanted him back anyway. So he's just telling them what they want to hear. This is what false prophets do. Then the prophet Jeremiah said unto the prophet Hananiah in the presence of the priests and in the presence of the people that stood in the house of the Lord, even the prophet Jeremiah said, Amen, the Lord do so. The Lord perform thy words, which thou hast prophesied, to bring again the vessels of the Lord's house, and all that is carried away captive from Babylon into this place. Nevertheless, hear thou now this word that I speak in thine ears, and in the ears of all the people. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. The prophet which prophesieth of peace, when the word of the prophet shall come to pass, then shall the prophet be known, that the Lord hath truly sent him. Now notice how Jeremiah has this sense at the beginning of his prophecy. He says, so let it be done what you say. Jeremiah's reply, he heartily wishes that Hananiah's predictions were capable of fulfillment, but it runs directly counter to the declarations of all the older prophets. War and evil and pestilence was their constant burden. Only by a terrible judgment could the people of Israel be purified for the Messianic age. You have to be put through the fire. And the old prophets always said this. So Hananiah, he hears this. All the people hear that Jeremiah, he remains with his message. He says, nope, that's not going to happen. I wish it would, but it's not going to. And Hananiah gets a little angry, and Hananiah the prophet took the yoke from off the prophet Jeremiah's neck and brake it, being made of wood. Had Hananiah been sent by the Lord, he might have been satisfied with Jeremiah's opinion and have contentedly awaited the issue. Just be patient, we'll see how it plays out. But instead of this, he seeks by means of violence to secure credence for his prophesying. So Hananiah, he breaks this yoke, and Hananiah spake in the presence of all the people, saying, Thus saith the Lord, even so will I break the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, from the neck of all nations within the space of 2 full years. And the prophet Jeremiah, what did he do? Went his way. That's the way to respond. Just walk away. Then the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah the prophet. After that Hananiah the prophet had broken the yoke from off the neck of the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Go and tell Hananiah. Then the Lord tells him, Go up right to Hananiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Thou hast broken the yokes of wood, but thou shalt make for them yokes of iron. Now will the burden even be worse, of iron. Hananiah's act would only serve by exciting the Jews to resistance, to render the servitude which they should undergo more harsh. Now, because of this false prophet, and you see the danger in having and listening to these false prophets now, and what kind of calamity that they can bring on a nation. Had this Hananiah just shut up and not said anything, then they would have remained. But now it's more stout. Now God's wrath is more incensed because of just one man running his mouth. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I have put a yoke of iron upon the neck of all these nations, that they may serve Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, and they shall serve him, and I have given him the beasts of the field also. Then said the prophet Jeremiah unto Hananiah the prophet. So Jeremiah, he goes right up to this false prophet after all that takes place. Hear now, Hananiah, the Lord hath not sent thee, but thou makest this people to trust in a lie. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will cast thee from off the face of the earth. This year thou shalt die, because thou hast taught rebellion against the Lord. So Hananiah the prophet died the same year in the 7th month. It's very specific on how quickly that this death came upon him. The prediction was uttered in the 5th month. Jeremiah told him this in the 5th month. Hananiah's death took place in the 7th month. That is, within 2 months after the prediction, answering with awful significance to the 2 years in which Hananiah had foretold that the yoke imposed by Babylon would end. And this really shows us the importance of Jeremiah's message. How if you spoke against it, you were slain. You weren't just rebuked, but outright killed. I mean, this was a tragedy. It could have been easily avoided. I thank you all for joining me once again, my dear friends, and I hope that you all learned something. Quite many events right here, very significant, played out. Lord willing, we're going to be getting into Jeremiah 29 very soon. Got a peace be with you. Amen.